And we know that folks are joining, but we're going to go ahead and get going and record the presentation for folks who may want to watch who weren't able to attend in person. I'm Amanda Hatton. I am leading today's meeting. I'm a part of the consultant team. I'm working in collaboration with the county to carry out this update to the county's comprehensive plan. Before we jump into too much, I want to make some introductions. On the planning side, several colleagues are here with me today to help facilitate. We have Caroline Evans, who's our principal in charge, Sarah Beddington, who is leading a lot of our outreach and coordination behind the scenes, Ansley Joan, fellow community planner, as well as Paige Hatley with Hatley Plans. She is helping provide strategic guidance to the land use work on the project, as well as in partnership with Ross and Associates, leading the update to the impact fee ordinance and capital improvement element, which feeds into the comp plan. And I'm not sure if I failed to mention that Amanda, I'm with Blue Cypress Consulting, and so we're the lead firm leading the overall work, but we are working closely with the county staff. Right now, I know we have several folks on the call. We have Steve Ledbetter, the county manager, who is, among all his other things, managing this project for the county. Brad Vaughn, the interim community development director, there in the background. We are joined by DeAndre Smith, who leads the county's communications and outreach efforts. And thank you, DeAndre, for all the work you've done on the project to keep us moving. And then we have Commissioner Davis from the Board of Commissioners here. Thank you for sitting in and making sure we're keeping things on track. So we're going to move forward with our presentation today. We have about an hour to walk through some overview information, but we're really here to hear from community members. So here's our agenda, and we're going to spend about 15 minutes giving an overview of the comprehensive plan, where we are in the planning process, and our goals for today. Then we're going to jump into a vision and goals poll using the Zoom tool, and then we're going to hear a little bit more about the context for thinking about implementing the update to the plan and what are things we need to be thinking about. Paige is going to lead us through that presentation before we do an online input discussion using a tool called Mural. And we'll adjourn right at 1 o'clock. I do want to note that everyone's muted right now, and during the presentation, we'll ask that you stay muted. If you have a question or comment, please put it in the chat. But we will certainly unmute when we get to the discussion portion. You also should have seen a poll come up on the screen asking a little bit about your relationship to the county. Please make sure you fill that out to help us know who's here today. So our goals today are to let you know what we've heard to date and how that's informing our steps in updating the county's comprehensive plan. We want to, again, set the context for making sure this plan captures the vision and making sure it's implementable and is a realistic plan for the county. And then we want to spend some time really talking about where different types of land uses, such as housing and shops and retail and jobs, should go in the county in the future. And that's where we have an online board that we'll use to collect your input. And we certainly want to take any questions. Again, if you have them, put them in the chat. And I see there's a couple in there already. Looks like Sarah's helping out with where the poll is located. So moving right ahead, I know this is a repeat for some folks on the call, so I'm going to be quick, but we do want to make sure everyone knows what the comprehensive plan is. This is the county's long-term plan for future growth and development. It is meant to be visionary. We are thinking out at least 20 years and where we want to go. And then it has a short-term work program for making sure we move in that direction. This comprehensive plan does include Sunnyside and Orchard Hill. It does not include the city of Griffin. Griffin has a separate comprehensive plan. They will begin updating their plan this summer. So there is coordination going on, but they do a separate land use plan for the city. On a practical basis, this is the plan that guides rezoning decisions. So if somebody wants to change their zoning from residential to commercial, this is the plan that would tell your county staff and elected officials whether that's appropriate and in alignment with the county's vision for growth and development, and would help guide that recommendation through the review process and ultimately the decision by the Board of Commissioners. Otherwise, it serves as a day-to-day tool to help guide development decisions. It's also a requirement of the state, which is a really important detail because if to maintain eligible status, qualified local government status is really important because it does tie to certain infrastructure loans and grants, such as those for water and wastewater. So there's a really practical reason beyond setting that vision and helping guide where we're going. It's also tied to funding. Really briefly, the plan includes several different elements. I know it can start to get technical, so I'm going to be short here. The important thing is really to know that it has a vision and goals statement. That's one of the things we've been tasked with, is really giving a fresh look at what the long-term vision and goals are and making sure they're really speaking to where the county wants to go. It has a 5-year work program. Again, what are the actions we're going to take between 2023 and 2027 to see this plan forward? At the heart of the plan is really that land use policy. We are also required to look at broadband services. That's a new requirement of the state. Transportation is also a required element of the plan, but you guys are actually doing a concurrent comprehensive transportation plan, and that will be referenced as the transportation element. So we are coordinating with that transportation plan to make sure the two plans speak to each other, because transportation and land use work hand in hand and have a strong influence on each other. What you're seeing on the map is the future development. On the screen is a future development map. This is really what drives those rezoning decisions. Paige is going to spend more time talking to this later, but this is really a very important element of your comprehensive plan. And it's a key item that we're looking at updating and making sure it's aligned with that long-term vision. In terms of the planning process, we are a little over halfway through. We are working at lightning speed in order to meet your October required deadline for adoption. We are looking to have a draft plan in the hands of Steve over in the county manager's office in early June, so that it can get thoroughly reviewed and vetted before it comes before the Board of Commissioners in July for transmittal for state and regional review. So right now, we are in the process. We've kicked the project off. We did a lot of listening out in the community. I'll highlight some of what we heard a little later and what your county staff heard at some other input opportunities. And now we're starting to take that input and feed it into update to plan elements. So what are our priorities? How does that impact our 5-year work program? Where do we want to go from a land use standpoint? Does our current map speak to that? And what are policies that we might need to change? And so that's where we are right now. And that's some of the feedback we're looking for today to help further guide us as we move into the next step, which is really drafting the plan document and establishing what new policies and vision and goals may be in the plan update. I spoke a little bit to this earlier, but we are here at the very beginning of May, finishing up our second round of public meetings. If you notice the icons here, we have one more steering committee meeting and one more round of public input or open houses in June, again, before we look to that July transmittal date for state and regional review. We are aiming for adoption in September. Y'all can go as late as October to adopt the plan and still maintain that qualified government status that makes you eligible for those grants and loans that the state puts out. I've already spoken to most of this, but this is just highlighting really what we're focused on in this update. This is considered a major update, a really hard look at what's in your plan document and adjusting to make sure all the plan elements align. I do want to note that we are updating the capital improvement element as a part of this planning process. That's very much a technical effort, but it does eventually feed into your 5-year community work program. And so that's something that you'll see bubble back up when we go to transmit the document in the summertime. Comprehensive plan is a very collaborative process. We have our steering committee of, I think it's over 20 people representing elected officials, the economic development sector, residents, key community partners, and some businesses that are helping guide us and make sure we're on track. And then the broader public is really an important partner too, because we're looking at making sure that this plan reflects the communities as a whole's vision for the future. We have collected a good amount of input to date. We've actually held 2 steering committee meetings, so that should steering committee meeting 1 and 2. We held 2 visioning workshops, one virtual and one in person. Steve and other staff at the county carried out several fire station input sessions where they collected input on vision and goals and priorities that we'll be taking and feeding into what we've heard through the formal workshops. We've also carried out leader interviews, and the other thing that's missing from this slide is that last Wednesday we did have an action planning workshop in person at the senior center. So this is our second workshop. So all of this input we've been collecting, again, is coming back in and feeding the update to the plan document. One of those key elements that I mentioned earlier that we're really taking a hard look at is the vision and goals, and what's that framework for where we're going long term. And so we asked about keywords that people think of when they think long term, 20 years out, about Spalding County's future. And you'll see some of the things people are thinking about here: housing, infrastructure, change and progress. Sewer is a big topic. So we've taken all of this input, and you'll see here in a little bit, we're going to be asking for your feedback on some preliminary vision and goals. And so we want you to know that the way we've shaped those is based on this input that we've been collecting through these different channels today. We also have been vetting a list of priorities. We brought this forth to the steering committee twice. We've also brought it through the visioning workshops. All of these things listed here, we have gotten support that those are priorities moving forward. We're in the process of truncating and looking at how we can refine these a bit, but all of these things are things that in some shape or form we anticipate moving forward, and we'll look to refine it a little bit more as we go into the next phases. We've also been talking a lot about land use, and we're going to spend more time talking about it tonight because that future development map is really important. And some of the key things that we've heard so far: growth should be targeted. We want to make sure that we are targeting development for areas where we have sewer infrastructure, where we expect to have sewer infrastructure. There's a desire that we be compatible. Many people have spoke to the fact that they believe that the future development map is relatively compatible with the vision for where we want to go. There is continued voice that we want to preserve western areas of the county, and then expecting to see more growth residentially in the Northeast, and also starting to see some different investment along 1941. You all have recently adopted an overlay district, so looking at potential of mixed uses and higher quality development, commercial uses along that corridor. Last note here is that there has been a communication of a desire to connect. So we talked about tying into the transportation plan. Trails and paths often can provide a special connection between land use and transportation planning. And that's one thing we've been hearing, as well as how do we connect strategically within the community in different ways for people to get around. The last quick thing that I wanted to note is we've held several interviews, and some of the key things that we've heard to date are up here on the screen. I'll just point out some of the concerns and opportunities. We've heard a lot about the need to invest in sewer infrastructure and be strategic about sewer and growth and where we're targeting growth. Also, transportation has been a key topic, making sure that we're attracting strategic jobs, making sure people can get to those jobs, ensuring quality housing and development. So quality meaning materials that are durable and have a nice design to them. We've heard a ton about that. And we've heard some about broadband, and we've heard more topics, and this is a high level summary of what we've heard. So all that leaves me to stop talking and start to get input from you all. We have developed preliminary vision and goal statements, and we'd like to get a little bit of input on those. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ansley to introduce a brief poll that we have.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, so you should see a new poll popping up on your screen here. So as Amanda alluded to, we've been taking all of the input we've heard so far and coming up with a draft statement about how we can take all of those words we've been hearing and try to come up with something cohesive that represents the community's vision for Spalding County. So we want to hear now if this looks good to you, or if we should keep doing some work to refine it. So the vision reads: Spalding County will be a steward of quality, well-managed, conservation-sensitive development. The county will provide focused opportunities for public and private investment to raise the bar for current and future populations. So just let us know if you think it needs some work. We're happy to take any comments in the chat on your Zoom. Then as you complete that one, you'll scroll down and see a few other questions. So these are our draft goal statements. I'll go ahead and read these, but same thing. If you have any comments, just put them in the chat. But let us know if you think if you agree or disagree that these should be goals for the county. Our first one is grow our sense of community through our parks, public spaces, and facilities and connectedness. Balance community growth and natural resource protection. Coordinate infrastructure planning such as water, sewer, transportation, and future land use development. Next, we have expand access to technology and jobs. And facilitate high quality design and development. And lastly, retain our younger population. So far, we're only seeing a couple people have answered. So there you go. Now we're seeing more come in. Perfect. If you have questions on any of these, we're also, we can have a dialogue about that as well. All right, we'll keep it open another minute here. Okay, I think we're seeing it stalling, so we can move forward with the presentation.
And Ansley, since we have a small group, maybe we can see if anyone wants to share. I'm particularly interested in the vision statement. We have one person that says needs some work. If anyone's willing to share, if there's a particular aspect of that you feel needs more work than others, or the whole thing. Or you can share with us outside the meeting as well, and we'll provide our contact information on the website.
This is Clay. The vision statement, just nothing wrong with it, of course, but it just doesn't reach out and grab. I have a concept of a vision statement is something that people say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. They get excited about it. They migrate towards it from other places. And I'm not quite so certain that the citizens will look at that and say, oh, yeah, I want to get behind this. This is what I want the county to do. This is what we should be doing also. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not quite as good as I think it needs to be to grab citizens when they look at it and know that we're moving in the right direction.
I agree. I'd also like to know who answered the question, because it looks like there were only 3 responses and 2 here didn't answer.
Well, a couple of people said it looks good. If there's something you liked about it, then what you liked about it would be helpful to know too. Again, this was a first draft. We just put it together and been waiting to get feedback. So good or bad is helpful to us. If there's a word or two, you're like, definitely keep that in there, but not, maybe not this word, that would be helpful.
This is Clay. I'm probably not smart enough to be able to provide that detailed information to you right now.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any comments in the chat. So certainly if you have additional feedback, again, we have our contact information on the website, and we'll provide our project email address if you'd like to share anything with us outside the meeting. We're happy to take that too. Right. So that means we can move on our agenda. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Paige Hatley. We wanted to give you all a little bit of background information before we move into another discussion with the group.
Thanks, Amanda. Just checking, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
This is Clay, yes.
Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure. I don't trust my computer these days. So again, thank you, Amanda. In order to prepare a comp plan that's tailored to the community's needs and therefore can more readily move from the planning phase to implementation, public involvement, which is why we're here today, is of course key. It's also useful to look at what we call the planning context, which we mean conditions or information to help us better understand local trends and issues, especially as they relate to growth and development in the county. So I want to highlight a primary example of that, which is population projections. There are 2 charts here that are generally telling us the same thing, that population growth has occurred and will continue to occur in unincorporated Spalding County. In other words, the areas outside of the cities. So the chart on the left shows this, for one, with the green representing the unincorporated area growing over the past 2 decades. It actually increased by about 25% in population. While Griffin is the gold bars you can see there, it's lost population, and Sunnyside and Orchard Hill have stayed about the same. Now the chart on the right shows an anticipated 20% or so increase in population in the unincorporated Spalding area. But rather, I should clarify just a little bit. The green line is the county service area. That's the scope of the comp plan, meaning unincorporated Spalding and the cities of Sunnyside and Orchard Hill, excluding Griffin. So that's the green line at the bottom with the total countywide population, the blue line at the top on the projected growth over the next 20 plus years. An example of why this information is useful is looking at the topic of housing. If it's understood that there is going to be growth in the unincorporated areas of the county, then that means we need to talk about housing and what type of housing and where it should be located to accommodate future growth. Next slide. Thank you. The availability of infrastructure is also important to know, as it can either support or limit growth and development, in particular the availability of sewer. The map here shows existing infrastructure, which is pretty much aligned in and around the city of Griffin as the primary service provider. But the county, as noted here, specifically the Water and Sewerage Facilities Authority, is going to be undertaking a study to look at the feasibility of the county providing sewer. Transportation or road infrastructure, Amanda already touched on, that's coming up in the next slide. She already touched on the link between transportation and land use and development, and pointed out the fact that we have the benefit of a parallel process with an update to the county's transportation plan, as well as additional studies that will also directly touch on the topics of transportation in greater detail than we're doing with the comprehensive plan here. But those other studies are the Griffin Bypass, which is looking at a longer range road project, and then a transit plan that was also being undertaken. We also wanted to highlight the airport development from a transportation perspective. There's a relationship with land uses, the perspective for the airport east of Griffin, the impact on uses, what's appropriate, what can or can't locate in and around an airport, and then also potential implications for economic development. Existing land use, here's just an aerial map. It's one tool that we can use to better understand existing uses, very broadly speaking, residential, commercial, industrial, parks, open space, where more rural areas, where areas that are developing relative to when the plan was last updated 5 years ago. And so we take this information and examples of the information that I pointed to on the previous slides as part of our analysis. We combine that with our public involvement that we receive to generate an updated future development map. And this is, as Amanda pointed out in the previous slide, this is the same map that's currently in effect from the 2017 update to the comprehensive plan, and can be found on the county's website, where there's full explanation in the body of the plan document describing each of these colors shown here. They are what's called character areas. The future development map is a type of character area based planning. So each color on this map that's currently in effect represents a certain character that's being promoted. At a minimum, appropriate land uses are recommended for each area, but the map and the supporting text or narrative in the document of the comprehensive plan provide an opportunity to go into greater detail with recommended action items that the county can pursue to help implement, whether that's an identification of zoning districts that support the allowed land uses or the appropriate land uses identified for each character area, or possible recommendations related to updates to local land use and development ordinances. And I've said the word land use a few times, and I think that's a good segue to the next slide. I'll kick it back to Amanda with respect to the next exercise.
Thank you, Paige. So, we wanted to set the context. So we're thinking about, all the things, why we have this long-term plan, because change is going to happen. And so we have a projection of population growth and employment growth. And so we want to spend some time today just talking about where those different types of land uses, housing and residential, services, retail, and jobs go in the community. And so we did this activity. I'm going to actually stop sharing. If I haven't, looks like I already did stop sharing. And I'm going to pull up a board. We did the same activity in the in-person workshop where people had sticky notes and get this up. Sticky notes and note cards, dots, so that they could tell us on a map where things went. And before I get to that activity, I'm forgetting that we wanted to spend a little bit of time on priorities. So you may recall, and that's what you're seeing on my screen right now. But before I jump into that, I'm going to just share a little bit about the tool that we have up. This is called a mural board, and Caroline or somebody else is going to put the link into the chat. Anybody is welcome to join from their computer. You could join from your phone. It's probably gonna be a little tricky to participate that way. But there's all these tools on the left side. You're gonna see people, Ansley's in the room with me, so I can see anyone who joins down here, and you can grab a sticky note and pull it on to the board and provide a comment. And so it's meant to be like a whiteboard. So we're going to help capture your comments today, but if you're feeling ambitious and want to participate virtually, you can. So that's what this is, this tool here. And when we get to some of the more in-depth boards, it'll be a little easier to pull things on. But one thing we did want to share is these initial priority areas that I introduced earlier in the meeting. At the in-person workshop, we had these on boards and we were asking for some initial feedback. So you may recall me talking about the 5-year work program. And so all comprehensive plans in the state are required to identify what are the priority needs and opportunities for the next 5 years for your community, and then how are you going to move them forward. So we, as I had noted, have collected input on priorities through all of the input we've collected to date. We feel like we have a pretty good list, and what we've started based on the feedback, what we've started to do is identify draft actions to address all of these priorities. These are preliminary ideas. Some of them have come from the steering committee. Some have come from your 2017 comprehensive plan. They're actions that are holdovers. They either are ongoing or they weren't addressed for one reason or another, which is relatively common in communities because we sometimes make a bigger to-do list than we can accomplish. So we don't have the time on this 1-hour meeting to go through all of these in detail, but we do want to let you know they're here. And then we're going to be posting them on the website tomorrow with a comment form. We've divided them up into 4 areas. Quality of life, which is really just about how you live on a day-to-day basis, supportive infrastructure, balanced growth, and economic development. These are all themes that go with future growth and development. And for each of them, you'll see initial draft actions. So if you're seeing any initially on the board that you have a reaction to, please feel free to put a comment in the chat. We don't expect you to be able to review them all in great detail on this 1-hour call, but we will have them on the website tomorrow. So again, priorities are over here. What is the potential action to address them? And some of these may be policies. So we're looking for some additional input from the public. We will be working closely with the county staff and with our steering committee over the next few weeks to refine and really narrow down what are those actions for the next 5 years. And we want to make sure that the list is realistic and achievable. I'm just kind of zooming in. If you do click on the mural link, you can scoot around on the board on your own and look at them. But please do note that if it has an asterisk, that's a comment. That's a recommendation that came out of our last steering committee meeting. For example, here you see develop a bike walkway trail on Roosevelt Railroad bed. And that was something that our steering committee had brought up as an opportunity to provide facilities for safe bike travel. The last board here is economic development. And you'll see some things like this 2017 plan means that's a carryover from your current 5-year work program. Prepare a county-wide economic development strategy. That was something recommended 5 years ago that the county hasn't gotten underway with yet. And it's still a salient thing that we feel is beneficial to move forward. I'm going to pause in case anyone else from the planning team wants to jump in if I missed anything here. Are there any questions? Commissioner Davis, did you have anything?
No, excuse me, let me get, I'm trying to get back so I can talk.
Sure.
In just a second, all of a sudden I'm in something, let me over here. Okay. No, I think I voted when we did the steering committee, so that's okay with me. I've already voted, so I know how that comes out. And just in case everybody wants to know while we're looking at it, I think the map is in pretty good shape. I think Paige has done a good job getting it just about where we need it to be. So I'm very pleased with that. That's all I got right now.
Okay, thank you. And I will note that since the steering committee meeting, because I know we have at least one other person from the steering committee here, we have at the steering committee, we were asking for ideas to address each priority. Since then, we've gone ahead and added these new actions. So we're not really asking folks to necessarily vote at this point. What we asked in person was, is there something on here that you feel like the county should not be doing? Or is there something missing that you're like, well, if we're setting Spalding apart as a unique place, we really need to put better signage and, you know, on the way out of Henry County, perhaps something like that. So those are the types of things that we're looking for some feedback on. But again, this is a little bit of a technical exercise in terms of what can the community support from a resource standpoint, what's practical from a budget standpoint, and what really moves the county forward in the most strategic way. I see there's a couple things in the chat of just the mural activity. If no one has anything else to add, I think we'll go ahead and move over to the mapping activity. And since we have a small group, I think we're staying in one room. Is that right? Okay. And Paige, I'll invite you to please chime in as you see fit, and certainly other members of the team. So we're going to, through the next 20 minutes, rotate through these 3 different boards. So I'll just zoom out for a minute so we can see the whole. It's a little hard to see it all on virtually, but we're asking about residential uses. So where should housing go? What types of housing do we want in our community? Is it, you know, single family homes on larger lots? Is that where, you know, where we want to be in the future? Does that accommodate everyone? So that's what this is going to ask about, and I'll zoom in on that in a minute. Retail and services. So where should those go? Like, these are things that support us as community members. So grocery stores, restaurants, shopping, things of that nature, medical services, and then employers, which ties a little bit into retail and services. Where do we want to see those in the job? So we're going to be using the input we discuss on this aerial map that's just really showing what's on the ground today, to then go back to that policy map, that future development map, to make sure that the way that we've designated it, as Paige spoke to, that it aligns with what we're hearing from the community. So here we are on the residential board.